Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Lila Rose Show. Okay, things are heating up right now. There was a huge news article from the Wall Street Journal in just the last week announcing that President Trump's administration will be defunding Planned Parenthood of Title X money. So let's break that down, what that means. That's a pocket of their $700 million they get from taxpayers. Also, there are going to be oral arguments at the Supreme Court about Planned Parenthood funding through Medicaid, another funding mechanism where they get hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. And there was a bombshell report in the Free Beacon about Planned Parenthood boasting about being the #2 hormone provider in the country to those struggling with gender identity. A lot to unpack. We're also going to be talking with Kristin Waggoner of the Alliance Defending Freedom about her take on all of this and so much more. So before we get into the Supreme Court case, it's always interesting to know what's going on with our Supreme Court and Planned Parenthood. I want to provide a little background here. You guys know through my organization, Live Action, I have been investigating Planned Parenthood for almost 2 decades now. Yes, Planned Parenthood is the biggest abortion chain in the country. They're around a 100-year-old organization. They've really built a reputation over the last century of really embedding themselves in our school system, in our government. There are actors wearing Planned Parenthood pins that show up at the Oscars. I mean, this is a very ingrained corporation. And a lot of people don't even realize this, but Planned Parenthood is not planning parenthood. So they are not helping parents have their children, helping parents plan when they're going to have their children. They're not, caring for the children or helping the parents care for the children. They're not teaching parents how to be parents. No. They're not planning parenthood. What Planned Parenthood does is they end parenthood. They are the biggest abortion chain in the country, ending the lives of 400,000 babies every single year. Now, people say, well, that's not all that they do. People who defend Planned Parenthood, they don't just do abortions. Yeah, they might be the biggest abortion chain, but that's not all they do. They do all of these other things. Well, interestingly, when you look at the latest annual report from Planned Parenthood, you will find that their overall services have declined. But what has increased over the last decade is their abortions. And what is now their new service at Planned Parenthood, besides abortion being a leading service, killing babies, is, guess what? You guessed it, gender-affirming care. They're really getting in on what I call the transgender ideology cult. I mean, it's really a cult infecting the minds of so many young people and just people at large who get confused about gender identity. They think, oh, now my body is the problem. I'm going to try to, castrate myself, God forbid, or give myself a mastectomy. If I, feel like I'm the opposite gender and I have breasts, I'm a girl, but I think I'm a boy. And then also I'm going to take hormones to try to look more like the other sex. This is particularly damaging when we're talking about young people who are prepubescent or going through puberty, and they take puberty blockers, right? And this can forever affect their fertility, their ability to actually be their own sex, their God-given sex. They try to be the other sex, then they never develop fully sexually into mature men or women, adults. So there's so much to talk about here, guys. I mean, this is something that I'm very passionate about. We've had different detransitioners on the show or people who've talked about this issue because so many people today are confused about their identity, confused about their gender. And then the culture is relentlessly telling them, you are born in the wrong body. If you have an issue with your current sex, with the sex you've been given, then you must be the other gender. And guess who is pushing this agenda? Surprise, surprise. It's Planned Parenthood, who says gender identity is really what you decide you are. You can be anything you want. And guess what? You come to Planned Parenthood. And after a 30-minute consultation at our Planned Parenthood facility, if you're a 17-year-old girl, we will give you hormones. We will help you transition. It's absolutely insane. And this Free Beacon article, we're going to pull that up here, really breaks down the experiences of some very young, impressionable people who crossed the threshold at Planned Parenthood and heartbreakingly received the last thing that they needed, which was to be put further at war with their bodies and told that, yes, they are not their God-given sex. And yes, Planned Parenthood would help them transition. So they kill babies. Almost 400,000 babies a year at Planned Parenthood are killed. And they're now the second largest provider of hormone drugs to people struggling with gender identity. I think that all of this needs to be understood within the context of we are funding them $700 million a year in taxpayer money. That's a ton of money, guys. And so what does this mean for the current Trump administration, for DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, run by Elon Musk, who's trying to make all these cuts to USAID, cut this, cut that? Why haven't we cut fully Planned Parenthood yet? That is the big question that we are asking in this episode, and we are unpacking in today's episode. Thrilled to have on Kristin Waggoner here from Alliance Defending Freedom. She's the general counsel as well as the president and CEO. I need to brag on Kristen for a minute because she has argued 3 cases before the Supreme Court of the United States and won all 3. And now under her leadership at ADF, they are winning cases right and left. Kristen, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Well, thank you for being here. It's just such a fun opportunity to join you, as I think we're in adjacent lanes in protecting life.
Thank you for your work. It's so important, obviously defending religious liberty, but really defending life. You do so much to defend life at Alliance Defending Freedom. And I just have to say really quick, I think it's now 20 years ago when I first started doing any kind of national investigative work of Planned Parenthood. It was ADF that was my first pro bono representation when Planned Parenthood tried to sue me. So thank you again to ADF. We're big fans over here. Kristen, you've got a really big...
We're big fans of all that you've done as well.
Thank you. You've got a really big day coming up here. April 3rd is oral arguments before the Supreme Court for your case, Medina versus Planned Parenthood. This is very much a crucial case with regard to the funding, the federal and taxpayer funding of Planned Parenthood. Can you lay out for folks really quickly here, what is this case and what oral arguments are about to look like? But first, a big thank you to our sponsor. I love 7 Weeks Coffee because they have the most delicious cups of coffee, but they're also on a mission to fund the pro-life movement 1 cup of coffee at a time. And that's why they donate 10% of all of their sales, not just their profits, but their sales, back to pregnancy resource centers to help moms and babies in need. And already 7 Weeks Coffee has donated over $800,000 to pregnancy resource centers. Now, let me tell you about the coffee because I'm very picky about my coffee. 7 Weeks Coffee only uses the top 1 to 2% of beans in the world. They are mold-free, shade-grown, pesticide-free, and organically farmed. And right now, when you set up your subscription to get your delicious 7 Weeks Coffee beans right to your door, you get a free limited edition Lent tote to help you remember to pray, fast, and drink your 7 Weeks Coffee during this Lent as we prepare for Easter. So go to 7weekscoffee.com today and you'll get 15% off forever of all your orders when you subscribe to get your monthly coffee, and use the code Lila at checkout to get an additional 10% off for a full 25% off your first order. Plus, you'll get your free gift.
Sure. Well, the oral argument's actually April 2nd. We would love that extra
2nd.
Day, but it's not available to us. So it's April 2nd for those who are going to be reading the newspapers. And you can also listen to the argument, which people should consider doing. But we will be able to stand before the court on behalf of the unborn and on behalf of women across the United States, but particularly in South Carolina, who are seeking to have comprehensive health care, which Planned Parenthood does not provide. Stepping back, it is looking at the Medicaid program, which is a federal program that essentially the federal government contracts with states to say, we have this money, we want you to use it for these purposes, and they enter into a contract. And as a part of that contract, the states are allowed to decide who are the qualified providers to provide this comprehensive healthcare service. And South Carolina has made a choice that, first of all, its public policy says no taxpayer funds will go to abortion. And so it's made the decision that Planned Parenthood is not a qualified provider. A number of other states have made that same choice, particularly in the wake of all the scandals that we see involving Planned Parenthood. And so that's the issue that's before the court, is whether a state has the right to say, we are not going to fund Planned Parenthood through taxpayer dollars. And I think it's also worth noting that Planned Parenthood is now the second largest provider of gender transition drugs that are extremely harmful and dangerous to individuals.
So right now, basically, you're defending South Carolina's right to say, of course, we don't want to give money to Planned Parenthood. You know, they're pushing hormone drugs. They're this abortion chain. There's endless corruptions. I mean, it would take a long time to get into that. You know, all the investigative reports on, I mean, even the New York Times is doing investigative reports on the shoddy activities and the negligence at Planned Parenthood facilities. Even the New York Times is doing that now. But at the courts, basically, you know, South Carolina, do they get to decide who's a trusted partner for women and families when it comes to ultimately taxpayer dollars.
Absolutely. And I think that the statistics here are so important in making this argument. For example, there are roughly 200 publicly funded health centers that are wanting to serve women and do serve women in South Carolina. There's no shortage of healthcare centers, and they're providing many, many services. But in response, Planned Parenthood is not providing any of the types of services that most people think. It's essentially spread misinformation about what it provides. And I think we also want to pay attention to the scandal that has taken place. You mentioned the New York Times article, and I think that most Americans would be shocked to know that in the last 5 years alone, Planned Parenthood has received $3.2 billion, with a B, billion dollars of direct taxpayer funding on top of $500 million in just 2022 alone of private funding. So we can talk about where that money went, but I can tell you much of it didn't go to providing health care to women.
So here's a big question. A lot of people say, well, Planned Parenthood, yes, they're they're the biggest abortion chain. People say, okay, that's just one thing that they do. And by the way, it's not like the taxpayer dollars are directly paying for the abortions. They're paying for these other services. And so that's why it's okay. It's not a big deal. What do you say to that?
Well, I say there's a lot of examples I could give, but money is fungible. That's the bottom line. And if I am going to help you pay your rent with $1,000 and then you use that money that you were going to pay for your rent for your vacation, I've paid for your vacation. Whatever label you put on the envelope, it's still the money that is exchanging hands. And I think what's exceptionally important to remember in this case is, again, money is fungible. South Carolina has the right to say, we are not going to use taxpayer money to fund abortion, and certainly not Planned Parenthood in the case where they have plenty of money. They have $2.5 billion in net assets right now. Why are we using taxpayer money when they're not even helping in a substantial way the women that are in need and not providing comprehensive care?
It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Kristen, I mean, you've got to win this one because a lot is riding on this. So thank you. I couldn't think of a better group and a better person to lead this charge than you and ADF. But this is South Carolina. Obviously, you're litigating on behalf of here. And South Carolina is one state. There's 50 states. And then at the federal level right now, there is a push to defund Planned Parenthood. And, there's an opportunity here, an opportunity of a lifetime, quite frankly, because we have a Trump administration that has indicated they want to cut government bloat. There's a Doge, Elon Musk spearheading Doge, cutting USAID, cutting this, cutting that. And then you have Congress, quite frankly, Speaker Mike Johnson, a really passionate pro-life advocate. We've got a majority in the House. We've got a majority, there's still the filibuster, but we have a bit of a lead in the Senate. So there's this opportunity now with, three branches. We've got the executive branch, we've got all of Congress, where we could finally accomplish this goal of defunding the biggest abortion chain and now the second biggest hormone basically seller, in the country. Are you hopeful about that project, that federal defund project? And then how is that going to be affected by this case that you have now at the Supreme Court, which even gives the government the right, South Carolina, in this case, the state, the right to defund and not get blocked by some activist judge?
Well, if you remember, Lila, in 2017, the House and the Senate did vote to defund Planned Parenthood. And I think it's important to remember how that happened. You were a vital part of it. CMP was a vital part of it, but it was exposing the corruption that was happening in Planned Parenthood. So in one lane, there's the cultural advocates, the investigators. And the next lane, we, along with other life groups, were going to Congress and saying, here's the evidence, producing reports before Congress. And for the first time ever, they voted to do that. But that was overridden by a veto, and now we're poised to have that again. It would be exceptional. It would be a moment in history, and regardless of even what you feel about abortion, which we know to be wrong and taking human life, it is about also government bloat. When you are having an organization, Planned Parenthood does not need American taxpayer dollars. There are other places we can put that. We also know, again, that $899 million that they have received from private donors, much of that money was used for politicking and legal costs. It's not even going to the local healthcare centers. So we're excited about this moment. I also think that it is a unique moment in that Yes, in 2017, we heard about the negotiated sale of body parts by Planned Parenthood. We knew then about the sex abuse that they ignore, that they don't report. But even now, in that New York Times article, they're continuing to reveal how women are being mistreated, even employees saying that they're a part of a conveyor belt. They're losing their lives as well as injuries. So this is the moment to stop this scandal and, again, to provide real health care options to women. Just because you may be disadvantaged and a part of Medicaid doesn't mean you should receive a lesser standard of health care. And that's what Planned Parenthood provides. It's more about their own agenda than the women that they're serving.
How did it get to the place, if you could just speak to this? I mean, it's wild to me that Planned Parenthood has the influence that it has. I mean, it spent 100 years building it, right? But that they've succeeded in getting, I mean, it's $700 million in taxpayer dollars in the last reported year, most of that from Medicaid. Can you just educate folks listening about that process? Like, how is it that that is even the case, that this one entity is getting that much money from taxpayers? And a big thank you to our next sponsor. EveryLife.com is America's pro-life baby diaper and wipes company. And I'm so excited to share about their new products too. I love EveryLife.com and I use EveryLife diapers and wipes for my little ones because these are a best-in-class product that are clean. There's no harmful dyes or fragrances or phthalates in this product. It is designed to be healthy for your little one and good for your little one's skin. If you go to EveryLife.com/join today, by joining the Changing Lives Club, you not only get 10% off your monthly diaper and wipe subscription, in addition to that, you'll get a free tote bag, and EveryLife.com will donate a box of diapers and wipes to a mother and baby in need. And I'm excited to share EveryLife.com is now offering training pants for your little one. These are 12-hour leak-proof training pants, pull-ups for that little one that is maybe potty training. You got to check them out. EveryLife also has just come out with their new shampoo and baby wash and lotion package. The product is amazing. I have already started to use it. That's EveryLife.com/join. Use the code Lila.
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert in how they built the empire, but what we do know is that they did build an empire, and it's an abortion industry, and that those who are in Washington, D.C., you know, there are lobbyists that are there are trade-offs that are made, and it truly is an industry. And I think that it's time for our politicians to respond with courage. And again, I would emphasize, you know, I've heard some talk of, well, abortion's a hot topic right now. Maybe Congress shouldn't address it. There are so many different ways that you can get at this to demonstrate that it's wrong, including even the transition that, you know, Planned Parenthood's peddling, not just on adults, but also on minors. In South Carolina, the same state that this case is in, they opposed a law that would stop cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers. They called it outrageous. Why? Because they're getting taxpayer money for it. And they're the second largest healthcare provider that's doing this. So again, I can't speak to all the ways. Smart business, I think a lot of deception, but we need to take that down, that brand, and bring reality and truth into the public square. And first and foremost, that baby is a human and that baby deserves life. We can't fund abortion any longer.
Kristen, what's your confidence level going into the oral arguments April 2nd? You know, I think that's when the time this airs, it's going to be tomorrow or just, you know, in the next day or two. And do you think that with the current Supreme Court that we have, you know, the Supreme Court that did overturn Roe v. Wade, do you think you're going to succeed?
Well, when we were on the team in overturning Roe versus Wade, I was much more afraid of that moment than this moment. And we're so pleased with that the Supreme Court made the right decision based on the law and based on the constitutional text as well as history. And I have faith that they're going to do that again. And the law is on our side. As an example, it might seem a little esoteric, but the spending clause under the Constitution is the provision that the federal government uses to provide this program. And that spending clause says that you can't create a right or an obligation on behalf of a state unless you make it exceptionally clear. And that hasn't happened here. So there are a lot of reasons that we should win this case. And we just need to pray and urge the Supreme Court to stand and also use the moment with our members of Congress and even our states to take action on this issue in this pivotal moment.
Thank you, Kristen. Where can people follow ADF and the breaking news about what you're doing in this fight to defund Planned Parenthood?
Well, they can go to adflegal.org, and we are just privileged to be a part of an alliance along with you. And again, I think it just takes all of us to expose what's happening and to urge people to do the right thing in this moment.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kristen. Good luck.
Thank you.
So let's look really quickly here at the facts that most people may not be aware of about Planned Parenthood. Now, as I said earlier, I've been investigating this group for pretty much 20 years. We have white papers exposing the abuses at Planned Parenthood. Basically, this is the most corrupt and evil organization, I believe, in human history, simply because they kill almost 400,000 babies every single year. The numbers of children that they have killed, the lives of those children that they have ended, are in the millions upon millions. And now they're involved in, yes, promoting gender transitioning on young people. That's part of what they do. There is a sordid history in their sex education of young people, promoting sexual experimentation and promiscuity to young people. So there's so much that we could unpack here. But what I want to draw your attention to is two investigative reports that actually came out, not from Live Action this time, from the New York Times, surprise, surprise, and from the Free Beacon. And I want you guys to be aware of this. Again, this just came out in the last month. So there's Planned Parenthood being reported on by the New York Times. Yeah, crazy here, guys. New York Times typically has been super pro Planned Parenthood. When the New York Times is turning against you, and you're like a left-wing pro-abort organization, then something must be really wrong here. Because you look at this article, the title of this investigative report from the NYT is Botched Care and Tired Staff, Planned Parenthood in Crisis. It goes on to talk about patients who went in for an abortion and they didn't actually complete the abortion at Planned Parenthood. So the baby is born at home and is born alive and then dies. I mean, heart-wrenching. I mean, this is the murder of a baby. Absolutely heart-wrenching. Misplaced IUDs. So a woman goes in, she wants an IUD, a form of long-acting contraceptive. The Planned Parenthood puts it in the wrong place. She gets pregnant. Staff that are not trained. Dirty facilities. I mean, it lists these crazy stories. Again, this is from the New York Times. So you see this article coming out. And keep in mind the context here. Planned Parenthood's budget has gone up every single year. I mean, they're just raking in the dollars. They're raking in the federal funding dollars. They've increased their federal funds year over year, pretty much every year in the last decade. And their private dollars continuing to go up. They get more and more, hundreds of millions of dollars in private foundations, private dollars. And then on top of that, guys, they charge many of their patients money in addition. So they have that funding stream. So they are rolling in the dough. In fact, they have $2.5 billion in assets. Assets means this is money in the bank. These are the value of all the materials that you own, the property you possess, $2.5 billion. So New York Times, crazy article here, listing stories like this one about a woman named Nakara Alston. She was 8 weeks pregnant. She got an abortion at Planned Parenthood. It says she was bleeding heavily afterwards. She found out that she was still pregnant. The baby was still in her womb. 12 weeks after the failed abortion, Miss Alston went into labor and delivered a baby who quickly died. I mean, when you read this, obviously, it's kind of presented to have empathy for Miss Alston. What about this precious baby, 8-week-old baby? They tried to murder it. Baby survived Planned Parenthood's botched abortion. And then she went into labor when the baby was almost 20 weeks old, almost old enough to survive outside the womb. And then now this baby is dead. I mean, it's just devastating, right? And then talks about this patient suing Planned Parenthood. So this article goes on and on. This, of course, was, an incredible article for the New York Times to pen, for them to do this investigative report. And a big thank you to our last sponsor today. Did you know that every year 200,000 families go bankrupt from medical bills, even with health insurance? For many people, insurance is simply not working for them. That's why I'm excited to share with you about CrowdHealth, which is an alternative model for paying for your healthcare. CrowdHealth takes your bills, personally negotiates them on your behalf, and then sends out a request to the community to help cover your bills. The CrowdHealth community has fully funded more than 5,000 medical bills over the last 2 years. This includes accidents like a young woman in Tennessee who lost her fingers in a boating accident, to NICU babies and cancer cases. Keep in mind, CrowdHealth is not the same thing as insurance, but it is an alternative model to help pay medical bills and keep your monthly costs low. So go to Join CrowdHealth today. Use the code Lila at checkout to get your first 3 months for only $99. That's joincrowdhealth.com and use the code Lila at checkout to get your first 3 months for only $99. Joincrowdhealth.com. This, of course, was an incredible article for the New York Times to pen for them to do this investigative report. But what really caught my eye was in the last 2 weeks, the Free Beacon doing their own report on Planned Parenthood. And I want you guys to take a look at this, because here's the deal. The current landscape is this. We've got the Trump administration. We've got DOJ. There's been a signal of, yes, we're going to cut government bloat. That's, largely it sounds like a good idea, right? A lot of money seemingly has been cut, federal layoffs, cutting USAID, other cuts that are being made. As of today, as of the day of the report of recording this, late March, Planned Parenthood is still receiving all their federal funding. No cuts have been made to Planned Parenthood's domestic federal funding. Now, there is a report, like I said earlier, from the Wall Street Journal that it looks like the Trump administration is saying they're going to cut the Title X money. So that's one pocket of money, maybe 60 million max, maybe 70 million through HHS, Health and Human Services. So if they cut that, that's great. But you're still talking over $600 million, $600 million that taxpayers are funding still Planned Parenthood. So why is this still happening? The Trump administration could stop this, right? So there's a lot of groups saying, hey, come on, DOJ, come on, Trump administration. This is a no-brainer. Cut this money, cut these funds. Well, there has been some conjecture that, one of the reasons this hasn't been a priority for President Donald Trump is because, pro-life isn't his lead issue. You guys know, those that watch this podcast, some of my criticisms last fall about the pro-life issue I felt was being abandoned on many fronts back during the campaign. And so I was very concerned about that, saying, pro-life voters want to see pro-life leadership. That's what we want to see. That's what we want to vote for. And so obviously with Trump taking office, much more pro-life than someone like Kamala Harris, that's clear. It was very exciting when he pardoned the pro-life prisoners. You guys might remember that back in January, just within days of his inauguration. That was amazing. These are pro-life activists like Bevelyn Williams, a hero of mine, who were praying outside abortion clinics, doing activism peacefully outside abortion clinics that were thrown in jail by the Biden administration. So that was great, right? But then the question is, will Trump defund Planned Parenthood, or will Congress send a bill to defund Planned Parenthood to President Trump? Or will Congress, when they have to do a budget every year for the federal government, will they exclude Planned Parenthood from the federal budget that they then send to Trump to sign, right? So these are all questions the pro-life community is asking. And the reason that this Free Beacon article exposing Planned Parenthood pushing hormones on young people, I think, is so important, is because even if President Trump is not aligned on abortion on life, which I pray and hope he will be one day, and fully be aligned on the importance of fighting abortion, the Trump administration has been very vocal, and there have been a lot of actions from the Trump administration that criticize the promotion of transgender ideology. You might remember the big executive order that Trump signed, I think just a month ago. He had all these girls over to the Oval Office for the signing who were in sports and who ended up having to compete against biological males in these sports. And he signed an executive order saying that no, girls should not have to compete in sports against biological males. So basically protecting girls, biological females, girls in their sports. So there's been a lot of, I think, action from the Trump administration and, a posture of we're going to defend children really against the trans ideology. This idea that you can be born in the wrong body, this idea that you should, take hormones or really castrate yourself or otherwise injure or mutilate your body if you feel like you're born in the wrong body to try to look like the other person, look like the other sex. This seems to be the posture of the Trump administration. So that being said, this Free Beacon expose is particularly compelling because what it shows is that Planned Parenthood, who knows where the money is, who tries to follow the trend, they're not only increasing their abortion numbers, but Planned Parenthood has been increasing their handing out of hormones. That's their new business model. They're not just committing abortions, but they're now handing out gender transition care, gender therapies, hormone therapies, and they're making money off of that. So here's the title of this article. It says, Planned Parenthood is helping teenagers transition after a 30-minute consult. Parents and doctors are sounding the alarm. The abortion provider is wading into transgender care, doling out prescriptions for estrogen and testosterone, including to special needs kids. It's so horrific when you think they kill the babies in the womb, and then if the children survive, their abortion empire, they give them sexual miseducation the trash that they try to teach young kids about sex is crazy. Sexually experiment, masturbate. I mean, really dark stuff to children, right? There's a social contagion today of people struggling with gender identity. Other kids see it. They think that that's cool, that that's what they should, that's what they're struggling with. Or maybe they have other issues. They have autism or depression or body dysphoria. They struggle with loving themselves or loving their own bodies. And so then they see, oh, well, then I might just be born in the wrong body. Sally over there is doing this, or this famous YouTuber actor's doing it. So that must mean that was something I should consider. And Planned Parenthood is taking advantage. They're taking advantage of vulnerable teens here. So the article goes on to share some stories. And one of them is the story of this young man named Fred, who was diagnosed with autism as a young child, had behavioral issues, special needs. And he was this young man who then was, questioning his gender identity. And Planned Parenthood is standing by to provide hormones for Fred, right? Similarly, they talk about other young people in this article, featuring other young people who themselves struggled with their gender identity. And Planned Parenthood, who's really good at building relationships in schools, because that's their whole gig, right? Their business model is make young people trust them, get these young people to be sexually active often, and then they come back for abortions. Or now a new business model is, if they're struggling with gender identity, reinforce that struggle and give them hormones, right? The article reads, Planned Parenthood is one of the largest providers of cross-sex hormones in the United States and one of the fastest growing. Affiliates in the greater Portland area, so this is Oregon, saw nearly a 400% increase in gender-affirming care visits between 2021 and 2022, according to their annual reports. They're seeing similar increases or even greater increases in states like even Ohio or in Tennessee. And Planned Parenthood is providing gender hormone treatments to teenagers. So these are very young people, very impressionable, and now they are boasting that they are the fastest growing provider of cross-sex hormones to vulnerable young people. In the story of Fred that I mentioned earlier, Fred literally went to Planned Parenthood and had a 30-minute evaluation ultimately, and was prescribed cross-sex hormones by Planned Parenthood after just 30 minutes. So these are incredibly powerful hormones that can dramatically affect your body. It can affect your mental health too. It certainly can affect your development. And again, Fred, this young person, received these hormones from Planned Parenthood, the prescription for them, after a 30-minute evaluation. So obviously Planned Parenthood is not there to do mental health care. They're not psychiatrists. They're usually staffed by nurse practitioners. They're getting into this business to literally get into a business, to make more money and to push their ideology. They're not actually caring for these young people. So here's the bottom line, guys. You just heard from Kristin Waggoner, who is talking about this Supreme Court case that is ongoing. Really, it's a question of, can these states and can the government ultimately defund Planned Parenthood? Of course, they should be able to. It's insane that we're even in the situation where there has to be court proceedings about this. But the reality is, now is the time. This is a very special time, a special moment in history when we are closer to defunding Planned Parenthood than we have, I believe, ever been as a movement. The opportunity is before us. So I want to encourage every single person listening to do this. At the description below here, there is a link which will direct you to a defund Planned Parenthood petition that will help you send an email to your member of Congress urging them to defund Planned Parenthood. I think your members of Congress, all of them, need to hear from you. In addition, there's an opportunity, if you sign up to receive action alerts from Live Action, to actually do calls to your Congress members to urge them to defund Planned Parenthood. And as always, continuing to make your voices heard on social media is very powerful, because the White House is looking at that. The White House is measuring, does the grassroots care about defund? Is that what the people want? Of course, the people want this. I believe it is possible to defund Planned Parenthood, and I believe ultimately they should be prosecuted and shut down for their crimes against humanity. But that can't happen unless we pray for that and we ask for that and we work towards that. So share this episode with a friend as well. Make sure that your friends are aware of Planned Parenthood's business activities, their ending of the lives of children, of course. Now they're pushing of cross-sex hormones on young people. Make sure you and the people that you care about are educated on this issue. And again, sign the petition to defund Planned Parenthood so that you can then be activated to call Congress to defund Planned Parenthood. Thanks so much again for listening to this episode of the Lila Rose podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. If you aren't already subscribed, hit that subscription button. And don't forget our Supercast. This is where we have our new Rose Report group, which is going to provide my special reports to you each week about what is on my mind, what I think matters right now in culture, as well as updates and behind the scenes about the podcast. There's also an opportunity over at Rose Report to put your questions in for upcoming guests so that you can have that exclusive access and so much more. I hope to see you